Hi guys, welcome to the MTC Midsem Prep workshop. Today we'll be doing object-oriented programming. First of all, thank you for joining the meeting. A couple of things. I'll be covering all the important concepts that you've studied in class and that will be asked for your midsems. And towards the end, after the explanations for the basic concepts are done and the important concepts, we'll also look into the last 2 years past papers as well, right? And the end, I'll give you some tips as well. So if you guys feel that okay, some part requires a little bit more explanation, or you have any more doubts that you want to ask in detail, we at the end we'll have about maybe 10-15 minutes. You can ask me then. So before we begin, can I get a thumbs up? Say if I'm audible and if my screen is visible to you guys. Uh, Guys. Okay, perfect. All right. Let's begin then. So, object-oriented programming, right? Okay, next slide. So, in your first year, you guys must have learned C, and in C, you must have learned, how to write a string, arrays, how structures are done, and union lists and stuff like that, right? So, C language, it's a programming language in itself. So definitely you must be wondering why is object-oriented programming taught in Java and not in C. The thing is, C is a relatively low-level programming language. It has a lot of restrictions. So using C, we've come up with a lot of other programming languages that has object-oriented programming in it. In short, basically, it's like it has a set of unique features like security, restrictions, abstraction, so on and so forth, that we'll go into more detail later on, right? So the functionality aspect of C language is lacking. That we are trying to overcome in the programming languages that had come later on with OOPS or object-oriented programming, right? So keeping this in mind, let's move forward. So uh, the four main pillars or the four things that you need to understand that will not only be asked in your midsems but later on in interviews as well, whether they're technical or not, um, is uh, abstraction, polymorphism, inheritance, and encapsulation. Or a mnemonic for this is 8pi. Okay. We'll go into them more in detail, right? So just keep this in mind. Now, coming to abstraction, so a way to help understand abstraction is basically like you define. Okay, let's take the example of Subway Surfers, right? You have a character, and that character should have a certain set of rules. And if you need to add another character to the game, rather than coding that entire character from scratch, you can have one main class or one main function with all the rules that a character should follow in the game. And then whenever you need to add new characters, you can simply call or extend that function to that character and automatically uh, implement it, and it saves you a lot of time and you're not writing the same code again and again, right? Then second part is polymorphism. In polymorphism, the thing is the same concept as abstraction, but only thing is the functions that you've defined earlier on in that class, you will be able to rewrite those functions if, let's say, for example, one character is paid in Subway Surfers. So obviously it's going to, what do you say, follow the same rules that you've defined earlier. However, you have to pay to use that character before you know you can even play with that character. So that payment part and stuff, you can include it separately while at the same time extending the rules that apply to the character as well. Now moving on to inheritance, it's literally the pure meaning in itself, like uh, just taking all the let's say for example, what do you say, there is a class called mammals, right? In that mammals, we've defined, okay, mammals give birth, mammals have can walk on two legs, and then you have a class called human. That is a separate class. So all you'll do is you can write human extends mammal. So all the properties that are there in mammal will come for human as well. Then the next part is encapsulation. Encapsulation is where you learn about access classifiers, oh sorry, access modifiers, where you learn about different levels of security for each of your functions and how much control they have for other parts of the code as well. We'll again look into this more in detail further down. So now coming to the basic and most important aspect of object-oriented programming is you're learning this entire course in Java, right? So although you have the experience of C, it's the syntax is more or less somewhat similar, but then there are a lot of new extra words and it's completely new. But the logic aspect and stuff still remains the same. So if you look over here, right? In in C language, you learned about a data structure called structs or a structure. First, you define it by the keyword struct, then the name of the struct, and then the two parameters that you want to define it with its data type, and then later on define it in the main code like this, right? So similarly, what do you say? You have a concept called classes in Java. Java, you can think in Java, you can think of classes as modified structures or modified structs. Basically, again, you use the keyword called class, you give a unique name of it for that class, and then you define the parameters again, and then a separate you can define its own functions, and simply in the main program you write it as class main, and then you again by default public static void main string args. That is the syntax, and over here what you do is you define an instance of that class that you've made over here, right? So that is the concept. Now moving on. Now, how do you assign or how do you access values from the class? So we learned how to define a class, which is simply with that keyword, giving it a unique name, and then you give it a unique parameter, and then you have different functions in it. Then you make an instance of it by simply giving it the unique name with the sorry by giving it a unique name of the class that you gave. Here in the main function, it will be like your data type. That, and then you give the unique name, which is Z, and then you use the keyword new, and then you give the function like this, and then you give the parameters over here. That will be passed on to the constructor over here. What is constructor and everything? I'll tell you about all this later down, right? But the point is over here, what I want you to understand is here you've defined two temporary variables, right? A and B. So how do you give or assign the value to A specifically and to B specifically? See, if I pass like one, maybe the values right over here, how do I know that it's gone to this particular variable? So instead what we do is we after creating an instance of it, you write the name of the instance dot and what variable you want to assign the value to. So it'll be z dot a is equal to 10 and z dot b is equal to 5. And another point that I want to note is while you were doing C, sometimes you used to get garbage value and stuff as your output. In Java also sometimes you might get garbage value, but then in C you used to free up the memories, right? Sometimes if you were to use pointers or something like that. But in Java it automatically does it for you. So whenever create a new instance of a class, it automatically initializes the variables over here, both of them to 0. Okay, that is a point that I want you to understand over here. And then you can have the normal code over here. doesn't matter. And another thing that I want you to guys to know is that when you print the values, right, of A and B, let's say you've declared the instances and you assign the value and you're going to print. So when you're printing, you need to say Z dot A and Z dot B because you've assigned the value specifically to those variables. But let's say what would happen if you simply type system.out.println Z? What would happen then? That is, would you still get 5 and 10? No, that's the wrong answer. What you will get is the memory address of where this is stored. Keep this in mind because sometimes to confuse you in your midsems, they'll give you all this code and then they'll be like system.out.println z. So many people make the mistake of writing 5 and 10 because they've assigned it over here, right? But that is not the case. It'll simply print the memory. Okay. All right, moving on to the next thing is the toString method. Again, it's a piece of code. I know I'm using too much code over here to explain, but it's best understood with the help of an example. So I've taken this from your PPTs only, don't worry. So again, you've defined the class over here, and again, you've defined two variables. What is this private and everything? It's an access modifier, right? What is an access modifier? We'll come to that later on. But for now, just think of these as two variables, right? And then over here, you've defined the constructor. Okay, what is a constructor? We'll come to that as well. Basically, in short, it just takes it's a placeholder that when you make a new instance over here and you pass these two, it will contact this function first and then assign that inputs that you give over here to the variables that you've defined here. But we'll go about that in more detail later on. But basically, what I want to tell you over here is about the toString function. ToString function is basically just what do you say? It'll just print the value, print whatever string that you've put over here. Here we've given return name, age, and stuff like that. That's it. So how this will work? Same way as we did previously. First, we will give the custom class data type that we declared over here, then a unique name to it, use the new keyword, then we'll pass what values that we want to give. In this case, we gave Alice and we gave the age of Alice. Then you'll do system.out.println person. That will print the, as we mentioned, that will print the memory address of it. But then if you try to do person.toString, then that will print the this value. So it will print name is equal to Alice and age is equal to 30. That's it. That's the output over here. I hope everything is fine up until here. Can you give me a thumbs up if it's fine? If okay, perfect, perfect. All right, let's move on to the next one, right? Okay, what are constructors? We saw over here, right? I explained to you guys about constructors, but let's look at more into detail, like what it is. Uh, so it is okay. This is theory. We'll come back to this. So basically, again, whenever we define a class, right? We define the parameters, but let's say I were not to declare this piece of code. This is the constructor's piece of code. Let's say if it was not there and I initial created a new instance of it, how would how would the Java programming language know that where I want to send the 2 and where I want to send the 5? Without this piece of code, if I simply send it over here, normal cases when you run the code, it will give an error. But if I simply give 2 and 5 as a input to this instance, how will it know that, okay, I wanted 2 to go to A and 5 to go to B? So that is where our constructor plays a very important role. Here we always define the constructor with the same name that we give the class, and whenever you create a new instance, that goes and we initialize it with the parameter that you've defined over here. But always ensure that whenever you declare a constructor, you need to maintain the same name as that of the class, and you use this keyword for each parameter that you're initializing it with. Okay. Do not forget these two important steps. That's pretty much it. Now, moving on. Okay, to see the full workflow of this, you pass these two parameters and then you do z dot add. This is how you call the function, these two functions, and then it'll simply print the output of 7. Now let's look at the theory. What are the constructor? It is irritating to assign values individually. So constructors are a way to assign values while declaring itself. It's a special type of method. Yeah, this is another thing that you guys need to take note of, because they might ask you this in MCQs or true or false. There is no return type, not even void. And another thing is all classes have a default constructor and within them. So this example over here, even if I don't write this, Java has already implemented this by default. So the instance where I asked you to forget this, that is just for you to understand. But even if you don't declare this, by default there is a constructor. But it is good practice to always write your own constructor where all values are initialized to null or zero. Again, guys, pay attention to the key values, right? Null or zero, and default constructor, and no return type, not even void for for constructors for your MCQ and for true and false part. Okay. Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next one. Now we have a concept of multiple constructors, right? In multiple constructors, as the name suggests, we know what are constructors. So multiple constructors means when I have more than one constructors. If you see over here, I have one over here and I have one over here. But what is different in them? Here I've defined two parameters of what I have declared over here, and here I've defined only one, right? So when I create an instance over here and I pass two variables, this will go and call this constructor. But let's say I call only one constructor, I pass only one, like via data, this will go and call this constructor. Fine, that's the only thing. That is a case of multiple constructor. But if they give you a question like this, we learned what is constructor, we learned how to declare a constructor, we learned what is a multiple constructor also. But let's say I give this question came in your exam. Okay, it's all similar, everything is same as the previous one, but look at the main part of the code, right? Look at the main part of the code. A z is equal to new of 2 comma 5. Fine, it's okay, that works. It will call this constructor because we're passing two parameters. And here we saw that, okay, I passed one parameter and it called this constructor. But what will happen if I don't pass any values? Exactly, it will give you an error. The answer is here, obviously. So yeah, it will give you an error, because the default constructor is neglected. When you write your own constructor, it always overwrites the default constructor. Okay. But if you were to remove this piece of code, remember, if you were to remove this piece of code, then there would be no error if you were to create an instance of it. Okay, let's look at this question now, right? Let's look at this question. Okay, so in this question, what is going to happen? In this question, it's more or less similar to the code that we've handled over here. But what is different? Over here near the constructor, till now we were writing the keyword public, but suddenly I use the keyword private. What is this private? It's an access modifier. What is that? We'll come to it later. But you have to know, okay, from your classes you might have learned, but private keyword means it becomes unique to this particular class. So any like non what do you say, non static variables and stuff, you can't directly assign to it. So what happens over here is, when you try to create an instance of this class, it'll create an error. Why? Because the constructor you've given as private. So the devil is in the detail, guys. I've showed you the same code again and again, but your teachers can manipulate it and ask you for the output. So be careful that you pay attention, you read the question properly, because most of these kind of questions will always be tricky and it won't be direct or it won't be straightforward. So ensure you read the code properly. And sometimes while reading the code also you might think, oh, okay, it looks the same, but definitely like there is some catch to it. So be suspicious when you're answering the questions, right? Okay, perfect. Now we come to the concept of access modifiers, right? Access modifiers, basically you have three keywords: public, private, and protected. Then public is basically where everyone can access, right? If we, that is why in constructor, wherever you build a constructor, we use the keyword public. If you see over here, that means no matter in the main function, anywhere I want to create an instance of this class, I can create it, no worries, and I can pass my own value. But if I use the keyword private, it is only accessible within the class itself. Okay, it is only accessible within the class where we declare the keyword private. And another thing I want you to notice is that even if I extend the class, extend is what? Extend is basically the property of inheritance, which we discussed over here, right? Where you have where you have a human and you have a mammal, and when you what do you say? Write the code for it, you will write human extends mammal. So if I use anything with a private keyword in mammal, it won't come over here. So please take note of that. All right. Now let's go. So please take note of that. Then another thing is protected. Accessible with it is only accessible within the class and extended classes also. But this time when you use the word keyword protected, the property of inheritance you can do. But in the case of private, you cannot do that. When you're going for your exam, I believe it's open book. Ensure you take a what do you say? A screenshot of this or take a picture of this and go, because they might ask you like fill in the blank type questions or fill in the code type questions, and they might tell you, oh, okay, this class was not able to be extended over here. Why is that? Fill in the keyword because of that, because of this reason. So ensure you have a few points of this with you, or you have the table over here. It'll help you tremendously during exam. Okay, uh, yeah. So now, before we go forward, right, I want you explain what exactly is a subclass. Class, I already explained to you guys. I'm sure you know what is class properly by now. But now I have to explain what exactly is a subclass. So you have a main class over here called animal. How we make a class? Same. We simply give the keyword class and then we give a unique name to it, define a particular parameter, and then its constructor. This will be our main class. Okay. But but mammals are also animals, right? So let's take the example of creating a new subclass that I want to have the properties of animals as well. So how will I declare that, or how will I make something like that? That I'll do with the help of same way how I declare a class, but this time I'll use a unique keyword called extends. I've mentioned this previously, but ensure that you're listening to all the keywords that I'm saying. So it'll be class mammals extends animal. So whatever properties are here will come here also. And another important thing that I want you to take notice. One second, I need some space to show you this. Series yeah. So I want to show you this. Is that one? Yeah. Is is that not- okay? Yeah. Is that yeah? this part is clear, I hope, is that in the constructor of the constructor of the subclass, you will always write the keyword super. Okay, you will always write the keyword of super. If this keyword is not there, 100% you will get an error. So two things you have to take care while declaring a subclass. You need to write the keyword extends and you need to write the keyword super, right? Same thing I did here again, but with tiger. None tiger, but this time I'm extending mammals to tiger. Okay. And then again, I've defined the,
Hello, hello, hello.
okay, sorry about that. Yeah. So over here, again, I've declared the constructor. Yeah, that's pretty much it. And then you create an instance of tiger and then you assign the variable to, and then what do you say? It will start by calling from the main class onwards. So animal.type will be equal to 2. That's pretty much it over here. Now moving on, you have something called method overriding. Method overriding is basically like, let's say for example, here you've declared the parent class, but the same class you've extended it with the help of inheritance. But now, what do you say? The function that you've declared here and the function that you want from vehicle over here, it needs to have two different like properties. So that is when you use method overriding to rewrite the function over here. And if you don't want that to happen, you can simply, what you can do is use the super.move keyword to simply extend this over here. That's pretty much it. And then you create an instance over here, and then normally it keeps happening. Then the next thing is getter and setter. It is pretty basic as the name suggests. Setter is basically like if you want to assign a new value to a parameter based on the function that, based on the, what do you say, a new instance that you've created, or you want to reinitialize it, you can use this function. This will be declared inside the class. So it will be declared inside a class over here or maybe over here. And similarly, getter is basically when you want to print that particular thing back. So it's simply, and also take note of the data type of the function that you're declaring. Since you're giving a output over here, you're giving the data type of int, and since you're giving input over here, you don't know what the input is going to be. So it's better to give void itself over here. Moving on to the next thing. Okay, sometimes you might get questions like this. So let's have a look, right? Which of the following are valid main method declarations? So public static void main string args. Array, this is the right declaration only. So what is the problem? If you see, it's case sensitive. The M over here is capital, so that is wrong. So let's look at the other one. Yeah. So you have public static int main string args. Again, void is always, you keep writing public static void main, it's for a reason, because the main function should always be declared without a data type, a specific one. So that is the issue over here. Then the another thing, moving on, public static void main string args, what is the problem here? We're missing the brackets over here. That's the problem over here. Then you have public final synchronized, a lot of keywords void main, and then string args. This is not good. This is not the right way to define the main function. Another thing is, this is fine though. Public static final synchronized. This is okay though. This is fine. Now, another thing that I want you to notice is sometimes people might not write the brackets, but they might use the three dots annotation. So instead of the brackets, they'll use three dots annotation. So the question would be, is this valid? Public static void main string like this, three dots args? Yes, it is valid. Public void static main string args. Is this right? Yes, this is also right. So just pay attention to the if it's capital or lowercase, whether the void data type is there or not, brackets are there or not. If brackets are not there, either look for the three dots. If three dots are not there and brackets are not there, then it won't work. It'll throw an error. That's pretty much it. Let's move on to the next one. Uh, there are a lot of tricky questions that they can ask with the bitwise operation as well. So, more specifically in the left shift, right shift, and unsigned. Left shift is basically like, as the name suggests, the bits will just shift left. So, let's say you have 1100. So after it shifts left by one, it'll become 110000. A simple zero will be added. Shift right, if it's a signed number, you always have to pay attention to the most significant bit, and you have to add it with the number, right? Now for unsigned, it's simply like you have to give the zero. You have to give zero over there. So when you're left shifting left, it will be zero. When you're shifting right, it will be either one or zero. It depends on the most significant bit, right? Or and for unsigned, it's all positive, so it'll only be zero. When you're shifting, you can directly add zero. Bitwise and is basically like similar to your DD course. I don't know if you guys are doing DD right now. Yeah, I think you are. So basically, what do you say? You have one. It your output should be one. If it's 1 0, it's zero. If it's 0 1, it's zero. If it's 0 0, then it's zero. Similar to your DD, but instead of one, you'll have to treat it as true false. So one will be treated as true. So it'll be true true gives true. True false gives false. False true gives false, and false false gives false. Then it's what do you say? Similarly, you can do for or operation as well. So now you come to the use of static keywords. Then this is the global instance variables. Basically, in a class you've declared static sta normally you declare just intent count and you initialize it to zero. Some you don't even need to initialize it with zero sometimes, but here they've done it and they've given the keyword static and then they've initialized the constructor as well. So when you call this, this will increment by one. That's pretty much it. So and it gets updated over here. And as you keep calling this again and again, this value will become 2, 3, and it will be stored over here itself because you've declared the static variable. It gives a sort of global effect to that particular variable. Now, moving on to the use of static keywords, right? One thing that you have to note, and they might try to confuse you while you're writing the paper, is that if you try to call a static function or a static variable from a non-static function or something, it'll return an error. So this can be a true or false question, right? Ensure that you keep track of this, and also if you try to directly call the function from the class without creating an instance, it will still not work. It'll give you an error. Again, guys, pay attention to the keywords that I'm telling you. I'll tell you again. If you use the keyword static in your class and you try to call it from a non-static function, it will return error. And if you try to call the function by not creating an instance, what is an instance? This is an instance we saw. Instance is basically using the new keyword and the class name to create an instance of that of that class. If that you don't do and you directly just use the class name and the function over here, it will return an error again. I hope it's clear till here. Moving on. Okay, this is very important because they might ask you this for an output based question. Excuse me. So, okay, so you have the class function over here, right? Here you've declared static blocks, right? Static block is just basically a piece of code that will only run once. So you have you have two static blocks here. You have a constructor and you have a static method. ठीक है? Then you've created an instance of this. You've created an instance of this twice. Why I am telling you this? When you create the instance of this for the first time, I repeat, when you create an instance of this class for the first time, it will run the static block once. So the output will be static block in class A executed 1, 2, 3, 4. Constructor A is executed and then it will, yeah, constructor A is executed. That's pretty much it. Then you call it again. Then these static blocks will not be executed and simply constructor in class A is executed and then you're calling the function static method display is called. So again, to reiterate, the first thing they'll print is system.out.println main method. This is one. Main method has started is one. We'll create a new instance of it for the first time. This will be two. This will be three. The static blocks will only be run once when you initialize it for the first time, or sorry, when you instantiate it for the first time, and then it'll call the constructor. This will be the fourth thing to run. Okay, this is not running because there we haven't called it. Then object 2, right, we are initializing it. So then go back again, but this time these two won't be executed, rather only this will be there, and then it's calling the function, and then, oh sorry, 1, 2, 3, 4, oh, this is fifth one, sorry, my bad. Fifth one, and then only this part will be executed, the sixth one. That's it. I hope that is clear. Moving on to the next one. We saw everything that will happen and type of questions they can ask you with static keyword. Let's move on to the final keyword. The theory behind this is basically final methods can't be overwritten by subclasses, final classes can't be extended, final variables can't be redeclared or reassigned. Basically, whatever freedom that you get in Java while declaring it, all of that will be removed. This is for security reasons. So whenever you use the final keyword, you cannot change it, right? If you declared final a is equal to 1 in some class, it will remain like that unless you manually go and try to change it, and even if you extend it, it will still remain the same. Okay, then you have this keyword, right? This keyword, we used it with our constructor before. It simply refers to the current instance of it. Preserve its memory. That's pretty much it. This is pretty much the brief theory around the specific words and keywords and stuff. From this point on, I recommend that you guys pay a lot more attention because a lot of 10 markers and 7 markers are going to come from this part of it. So arrays, basically, how do you declare an array? You declare the type of it. Most normally, people will declare their own class, a unique array name, the new keyword, the same name that you've defined over here for the class here again, and the size that you want to reserve for it. An example of this is int marks equal to new int 3. Okay. Oh, yes. Another thing, guys. Int is a class. It belongs to the integer class. So this they can ask you as true or false. It came in our paper. I think when we're solving it, I might try and show you guys. Then arrays in Java are objects. You create, there are two kinds, primitive or arrays of class objects. Primitive is basically whenever you use it with the existing data types like int, float, and stuff like that. But object arrays are basically when you custom, write class, like how do I let me show you an example of that. Yeah, let's say you custom write a class like animal or something, and then sorry, custom write a class like tiger or something, and then using that make an array with it. That is basically a object array. I hope that part is clear. So, for example, let's say you have a student class. So it'll be like students, student, bracket students equal to new student, and then reserve the memory that you want. Please go through this topic because it will definitely come in your midsem. Then how to iterate over it. This is how you declare the primitive one, primitive array, how you declare the. This is one of the unique ways of, writing the for loop, right? You start, initialize it with one, and then this will go from start to end. So you don't need to like specifically call the marks, or any something separate. You can simply just write it like this, and it'll print it from 0 to 2 index value, or it'll print three outputs. It is used to traverse the array easily, and there is no need of index tracking or anything like that. It'll go from the first to the end directly if you can write it like this. And majority of your questions that you might ask, like they might ask for 1 or 2 marks, they'll write the for loop like this. So don't get confused with this. Condition I less than equal to 5 I plus plus. If they don't write it like that, don't worry, don't get confused. This and this means almost the same thing. Now, how will you do the same iteration but for objects? More or less, it is the same way. Printing the arrays directly with display memory addresses. Okay, one thing that I want you guys to note here is when you print the values over here, it will print marks only. Why? Because it's just int. The other thing that I want you guys to notice over here, if you use this specific way of printing for objects, it will print the memory address values. It won't print the specific A and B separately. Okay. How do you print it? You have to write it specifically like this, where you'll have to specifically call for the unique parameter that you've declared over here. Again, I'm telling for you to understand. Int over here, you've used the basic data type. So if you write this, you will get proper marks like, okay, 90, 91, 92. You will get this. But let's say you declared like 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6 in your instantiation process, and you try to run this for loop for this particular instance, you will get memory addresses. You will get the memory of where these three locations are stored, and not this as it is. If you want to get this, you'll have to write it specifically like I dot A and I dot B. Okay, this should be your print statement, not this. If this is what they're asking you, it will be the memory addresses that are coming. Okay, perfect. Let's go to the next one. Then how do we assign values? Again, there are two ways to assign values depending on how you initialize the array. If it's with if it's with primitive data types, or if it's with class objects. So if it's with primitive data types, you can directly index it and assign the value. Okay, see how they're doing it over here. Same way how you did for your C language is also like this. Only thing is the index array declaration part is different over here, because you have to use the unique keyword for it to reserve the memory for this. Again, another thing how this works is when you initialize this, what happens is marks becomes a unique memory location, marks, right? And it stores the pointer to the three memory locations. Oh, sorry. That went a bit too much. Okay. Sorry. Okay, just pretend this is not here. That has a pointer that points to a location with three reserved memory for this particular instance. Okay, and then that is the primitive data type. Now for the objects, you will have to not only index it, but each time that you're going to assign a value to that index, you have to use a new instance keyword because it's a class, it's not a data type. Okay, I've mentioned this over here. Please pay attention to this because they will definitely ask you for your either true or false, or they might give you a code and they might ask you like what will be the output or what, can we do this? Or they might give you this line completely and they might cover the new keyword and they'll put a dash here and you'll be wondering what to write here. So again, guys, the devil is in the details. Pay attention to all the keywords that I'm using. I've written it here. Primitive arrays directly hold these values. Object arrays hold references. So each element must be created using new. Okay, I hope that part is clear. Now moving on, again, we saw 1D array. Let's go to 2D arrays. Again, the only thing that's going to change over here is while declaring it over here, wait, where is the, yeah, while declaring it over here, you only give one bracket. Here you will give two brackets. That's pretty much it. One will be your row and one will be your column. They might ask you to, like, they might ask you for like a 1 mark question to be like, write a 2D array and, asked to like take user input and stuff like that. I think there was a question like that for my midsem paper. I'll show it to you guys towards the end. Now taking user input from arrays. So if you guys are familiar with C, you used scanf, right, with your unique header function. Something like that is similar for Java also. Yes, we use the import java.util.scanner. Before you write any code in your paper, please write import Java. You write import. Sorry guys for the. I'm writing with the mouse, so it's not coming properly. But you write import java.util util dot star. Please just write this one line of code before writing anything else in your paper, because if you do not write this, they'll cut 2 marks, 2 or 3 marks. So simply don't lose marks. By always in your head while coding and while writing, be like import java.util.scanner. And the second thing you do is a public static void main string with the brackets and then args. Do not forget these things and put that inside a class. Then, okay, uh, coming back to the input part, again, scanner is your class, SC is your unique name, anything you can give. Most people give SC is equal to new scanner system.in. Never forget system.in. And then this will print enter size, and then what do you say? This is the next line concept. Basically, what do you say? It's a user defined array. So like whenever the people type something on the terminal, it takes that till the new line and it stores it in that place. And then what do you say? The here we are printing it back over here with all the way up till next line. This is how the code is for that. So what did we see here? How to take input? We take it input. We take input with the help of a unique uh, header file or a unique package, as it's called in Java. It's called scanner. How you create an instance of the scanner first. How you create a user defined array. You declare the array and then you try and you print out the same string over here. That's pretty much it for this part. Moving on, yeah, Java dot io, right? You can also, okay, sometimes they might ask you to take an input, but without using the scanner class. They've asked questions like this previously, so it's a bit tricky, especially because if you're using open book, if they are doing an open book examination, most of the time they might ask you to take input without scanner because everyone learns in lab as well as in class about scanner, and this is I think one or two slides only in your presentation. So again, this is a unique class. The process is just the same. Buffer reader, new buffer reader, instead of system in, yeah, system in is there, and you'll have to write this part extra as well. And then instead of next line over here, next int over here, you'll have to write uh, parse int dot and read line as well. So ensure you go through this part as well. Then moving on to the next part. For object arrays, again, wherever object arrays are given, you will have to use the dot and then the specific part parameter that you've defined in the class as well to take that input. So if let's say, for example, later on there's a question I'll show you, like calculate the keep a record of all the runs that a batsman has scored for the India Pakistan match. So let's say they, what do you say, you'll have to give Virat Kohli, okay, he scored these many runs. So how will you assign Virat Kohli's name to that particular parameter? That you need to do it with dot name and then dot runs, and you will also have to iterate through that loop with the help of the for loop and with this part. We'll discuss that question later on, but keep these discussions in mind, right? You can take dynamic user input for both primitive as well as object arrays using scanner or buffer reader. Do with scanner if they haven't mentioned anything in the question, because that is easier and that is what you're familiar with. If they have mentioned, you know how to do it because I explained it to you over here. Only thing that you have to take care of is buffer reader. Buffer reader will come here. This part is extra system.in, and then integer dot parseInt dot read live. That's all there is. Excuse me. Yeah. I hope it's clear till here. Then another thing they can ask you is random. Basically, not random, not random, but there is a package called math.random. Sometimes they might be like create a rock paper scissors game, and so if the person beats the Java program, then print okay you won. If the Java program beats you, then print you lost and stuff like that. So that part where you generate the scissors or the paper or rock or whatever, you do it with the help of a package called random. So one question that they asked us is how do you import math.random? This is from that package. This is how the package is built. Like this is the logic that they use, but you don't need to know that much. Only thing that you need to know about this package is basically how it is being imported and how it's being used. That's pretty much it. Now coming to the strings part. Strings, one thing you have to know in Java is immutable. This is again another 1 mark question, meaning once created, their values cannot be changed, right? Again, you will have to import a new package. This is different from util, right? So this is how you declare a string, and then this is how you accept a string from the input by a user. Over here, you did sc.nextInt. This is to accept numbers. This is to accept strings. sc.next or sc.nextLine. You can use one of them. And this is how you create a new instance of a string as well. Okay. One thing you have to take care of is the difference between declaring it like this and then declaring it like this. The one is where it is stored, if it's stored in string or if it's stored in heap memory, the location of where it is stored, and the another part over here is uh, here you can reuse it again and again, but over here it creates a new object of it in memory. That's pretty much it. Moving on to the next part. Yeah. this is a small thing that you guys have to know. Uh, so yeah, so over here we've declared two strings. These two are literally the same thing, string one and string two. If you compare S1 equal to S2, what exactly are you comparing? You should know. In what they're doing over here is exactly comparing the ASCII value, the total of the ASCII value means ASCII value of BPDC with the ASCII value of BPDC. That is why it returns true. If I change even a single letter from this, it will return false. So here, yeah. So another thing that you have to notice is the way, if since both of them are declared the same way, you can use this, no worries, and it will return true only. But over here, if you are initializing it with new string, it's part of a completely different memory loop. So if you try to do the same thing with this, it will return false because it's in a separate memory location, and they won't be able to get the value of the thing. So it'll be trying to compare it, the value of BPDC with the garbage value. That's why you're getting false. Now, to compare a string, there is a special function called dot compare to. So if S1 dot compare to S2, then it will return true, right? It will return zero. So keep track of that particular instance. And then if, again, as I mentioned, the comparison happens between the ASCII value of S1 and ASCII value of S2. So if S1 has more ASCII value than S2, then it will be greater. It will return a positive value. If it's vice versa, then it will return negative value. So you see how we declared two random strings, a apple and banana. When you compare it like this, you get a negative value because this has way more alphabets than this. So obviously it will have that. Now, coming to another thing, during your exams, they will ask you to write code, obviously, but one thing you have to understand that it's going to be a little different from your first year. You can use a lot more functions like dot upper, dot lower, uh, dot up, what do you say, replace. So many functions are there just in your PPT itself. So I recommend that you write it like this somewhat, and you go and you try and use these functions to write the code rather than uh, come up with I'm sorry, fresh logic to solve it, right? Now, one thing that you need to know is about string buffers and how that memory is being distributed. So whenever you create a new instance of it, what do you say? This is how it is structured. Basically, all the code and the text and stuff that you write ends up in this layer, and then what do you say? Initialized data is basically all the global variables as well as all the what do you say? Hard-coded variables or global variables that will come over here, and then your heap is basically your temporary memory. It does dynamic memory allocation, as it states here. Your stack is temporary variables as well. Right? Sorry, your heap is a more permanent memory. It keeps extending on this part. Your stack is your temporary variable. My bad, my bad, my bad. Okay, that's pretty much it from this part. Now, coming to string buffers, you have to import it from this particular package, and then it's creating an instance with the help of a string buffer, and then again the functions for the string buffer are unique to itself, and essentially what it will do is it will create a sort of like a um, it's a continuous memory basically. So when you instantiate this and you declare it, hello will be in the same line itself, and when you do dot append, it will just go and add on to this part, and this part again will come like this. So the output will be hello world, right? One thing you have to note is unlike string and unlike strings are mutable. If you remember when I started the topic of string buffers are mutable, right? You can change it, you can modify it. A lot of questions might come related to string manipulation with the help of string buffers. So ensure you go with the all the functions of string buffers written in your notebook as well. Another thing is it's more memory efficient. Again, it's another 1 mark question for true or false. Then string tokenizer. String tokenizer is basically, again, it's in the util package only. So if you write star over here, and initially no need to write this separately. Essentially, what that means is if you have a string, a big one, right, like this over here, you can do string tokenizer and you have to give 3 arguments for sure in this, which is where you store the string, how do you want to split it, until where do you want to split it. So from where to where is the second input that you're giving the string over here, right? Once that is done, when you run this part of the code, basically it will split apple, banana, and oranges, two separate parts of it. And when you print them, you will get it like this: apple, banana, and oranges. That's pretty much it. Remember that sometimes they might, what do you say, remove the ln over here and just write system.out.print. That time, this rather than having it on each line itself, it will be in a one continuous line like this. That's pretty much it. So in string tokenizers, it is used as a to break a string into smaller parts, or what we call as tokens, based on delimiters such as commas, spaces, or other symbols. And it's a simple and fast way to parse or split strings. That's pretty much it. As long as you know this piece of code, you will be fine. So ensure you have it written in your notes before you go for the exam. Okay. Okay, that's pretty much it for all the theory parts. Let's now discuss the Midsem paper of 2023. Okay, so I don't know, is this visible? I am not sure. Yeah, I think I'll start by telling you the brief. You guys can solve it at home if possible. I'll briefly tell you the pattern of the paper first. So, first, page will mostly be your MCQs, like 1 markers. I think around 5 of them will be there. And most of them will be like this. They might give you code and they might ask you what the program, like what the error might be. And the other one is like, again, bitwise operation. I told you there will be, oh God, I can't zoom in. There might be bitwise operations as well, and you might have to guess the output. And they'll give you a piece of code and they'll ask you for the output as well. If it is arithmetic type, they'll ask you for the final answer. And similarly, what is the output again over here as well? Then, again, the importance of this keyword as well. They are asking, what do you say? Complete the code to get the required output. See, fill in the code they've asked over here. And then again, they might give you a scenario over here and they might ask you to code out. So it's an 8 mark question. So they're basically okay. Another thing that they'll do is they'll give you a whole big backstory, and then they'll do is create a class. Yeah, they'll ask you to create a specific class, and they'll ask you to create the specific functions within. If it wasn't clear from the question, they'll ask you to create these functions, right? Add items, and it'll give you how to, like, what are the inputs that you need from this particular functions as well. These are the different notes that they'll give you. Like, this is like the things that you have to keep in mind, and then these are the different. Okay, this is the question that I told you about. The name of the int wrapper class is integer class. That is what I told you initially. A class that stores each element at most, a collection that store at most one and does not maintain any that heap or what is that stack part that I was talking to you guys about. And then you have this part where they'll give you a code and then ask you for the output again. Same over here as well. and yeah, multiple small parts of code. And this is another way they can ask the questions, where they might ask you to, they'll give you one line and they might ask you to write just for that specific part. No need to start writing from all the way from the beginning. If you just, the core logic is fine with the most important functions. Again, don't try to solve the question with what is hard logic, like coding it from scratch. You can use the functions that you've written. And this is another big 10 marker question. And then what do you say, this is another fill in the program type question. And then you have, again, writing a program again. And here they've mostly covered inheritance part of the concept, where you'll have to use extends and stuff like that. And here is again true or false, and you'll have to tell what the reason is and stuff like that. This is the year before that. And yeah, that's pretty much it from my side, guys. The paper is here. Some tips, you can solve it in your free time. Try and, practice this with the time limit and stuff, and hopefully try to finish it as fast as possible. And some tips to help you get good marks or try and help you finish it. Start with all the big questions that we spoke about, right? Where you'll have to write a lot of code. Pay attention to the code outputs, right? Always be suspicious of the questions because it's not always direct. Sometimes it is, but ensure that you're not missing any key logic or any trick that we've discussed throughout this workshop. Write the functions, all the functions that I spoke about for string buffer and for the other part thing that we discussed and before you go for exam. Don't try to take a printout of the PPT, sit and go and scroll like this during the presentation. It won't work. You'll lose a lot of time. Don't rely too much on the PPTs. That's what I'm saying. Don't try to cram anything. It's all application based. Keep track of time, drink water, and relax and chill, guys. That's pretty much it from my side. Hope you guys understood. And if you have any questions, you can let me know now.